Hello, everybody. Welcome to Keep the Channel Open. My name is Mike Sakasagawa, and this is episode 157. So, at the beginning of just about every episode, I say that this is a podcast about art, literature, and creativity. But if I'm being honest, it's about more than that. It's about connection, at least for me. And I hope that's true for my guests and for you, the audience. For me, art and literature are very much about connection. Maybe that's connection to the work or connection to its author through the work, or maybe it's a feeling of connection to something bigger than myself. And the art provides a way of facilitating that feeling. All that is just a little bit of context and perhaps a long way of saying that we're going to be doing something a little different in this episode. As I'm sure pretty much everyone knows, the U.S. had an election in November, and to say that it didn't go the way I wanted is an understatement. In the days immediately following the results, I found myself struggling, worrying about the future, wondering what I need to do, how I can contribute, and just feeling a sense of isolation that was scary. I think that feeling of being alone is something that a lot of us, maybe most of us, are pretty familiar with these days. There's a lot in our world and the systems we live in that make it that way. But the one thought that I kept coming back to was that whatever the future looks like, it's relationships, connection, and community that will sustain us and see us through. Over the past almost 9 years, I have talked with a lot of people on this show. Some have gone on to become close friends of mine. Some are friendly acquaintances. And it's always been my hope that everyone I've talked with is at least someone I've been able to provide an hour or so of pleasant conversation. I don't know if Keep the Channel Open is a community exactly. I don't know if it's that for my guests or for the listeners, but I know it's been a consistent point of connection for me. Back in 2020, when we were all going through lockdown, my dear friend Rachel Zucker did a series of episodes on her podcast Commonplace that she called a global roll call, where she reached out to her past guests and checked in with them, invited them to give updates about how they were doing and who they were with. That was, I think, for all of us, a time of profound isolation. And hearing all of those voices at that time was helpful for me, even though they weren't even necessarily people I knew. Just hearing Rachel connecting with them mattered to me. And I thought, why not try something like that with Keep the Channel Open? So I reached out to a bunch of past guests of the show and invited them to record a short message. I sent a short list of questions that could act as a prompt, though it was up to each person which questions to answer, if any, and how. I asked where each person is, whether literally or metaphorically. I asked who their thoughts were turning toward, who was sustaining them, and who they're giving their care to. And I asked how they're thinking of their work, whatever work means to them right now. The responses I got were all different, which makes sense, of course. Everybody's life is unique and specific. If there is one through line, it's, again, connection and community. Almost everyone mentioned friends or family or creative collaborations. We're all thinking of our work, our place in life, our contributions in different ways, but we all have people we're thinking of. And I'm happy to be able to share these messages with you. The first message I'm going to share is from Jose Pablo Iriarte, who's been my friend for more than 20 years now, since long before this show was even an idea, and before either of us had put any creative work out into the world. Joe was my guest in episode 23, back in the first year of the show, and then again this year in episode 149, when we talked about their debut middle grade novel, Benny Ramirez and the Nearly Departed. You're also going to hear from Jennifer Baker and then Lisa Robinson. Jen was my guest in episode 153. We talked about her YA novel, Forgive Me Not. And she's also the host of the Minorities in Publishing podcast. She was kind enough to have me on a few years ago to talk about a couple of my podcasting projects at the time. Lisa is a photographic artist who I met at the very first Medium Festival of Photography, which is where I've been introduced to so many of the photographers I've had on the show over the years. Lisa's lecture she gave about her conceptual landscape photography is one that really informed a lot of how I came to think about and develop my own photographic work over the years. Here's Jose Iriarte.
Hi, Mike, and hi, KTCO listeners. Where I am right now is in a parking garage at Disney Springs, which is not as cheeky literal an answer to where are you right now as it probably seems like, because it speaks to the way I'm juggling lives right now. For the moment, I have something like a novelist career going on. My debut book came out last April, my follow-up comes out in June, and I've got a third project in my editor's hands that I'm very jazzed about and that she seems favorable to. And hopefully in the near future, I'll know if she's going to offer on it or if we'll sell it somewhere else or what. But I know how quick novelist careers go cold. I have plenty of friends who had 1 or 2 books come out and now are looking for a deal or looking for an agent. So I feel the pressure to strike while the iron is hot. But on the other hand, I still like having health insurance, even the terrible health insurance I have. And I still like having predictable income. So I haven't quit my day job, which is teaching public school in Florida. During the school year, the grading and the paperwork piles up, but I also can't just postpone writing until some magical future when I'll have time, because that day doesn't exist. So I go out of the house to various places to put pressure on myself to get stuff done. Tonight it's Starbucks until closing time, and then tomorrow at 7 a.m. I'm back at work. The manuscript I'm working on right now is a queer middle grade novel, which is a bit of a scary thing to be working on just a month or so after we all watched 2 media giants capitulate in advance to fascism, and working as a teacher in a state where queer books in schools can get somebody's career ended. But as a non-binary author, I feel compelled right now to bring a fun non-binary adventure story into existence, so I'm doing this thing. So far, what I'm hearing from New York Publishing is that they are committed to continuing to publish diversity, including queer books. But is that true, or is that lip service? Well, I'm banking a lot on that being true. Maybe it's a good thing I haven't quit my day job. Anyway, thanks for listening. Not just now, but also thanks for having me on this show twice before. It's a hard time to be a lover of art, a hard time to be a creator of art, but on the other hand, it's a time, I think, when we most need art to speak truth to sometimes a hard-hearted populace. And that is where I am right now.
Hi, this is Jennifer Baker, or Jen Baker. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an author. I work in project management, and I'm also an editor, among many things, as well as a podcaster, just like Mike. And Mike asked a really great question. He asked several great questions, but the one I'm responding to is, how am I feeling about my work right now? And I think, spitballing here, friends, I feel like I've felt similarly over the past 10 years. There's been a lot of ebbs and flows in the world, a lot of growth for me as a person with more to come, a lot of changes for me personally, professionally, and creatively. And the work I do in all facets influences everything else, honestly. So me working currently for a nonprofit that works towards a multiracial democracy feeds into my work as a podcaster, which I've been doing for 10 years, feeds into my work as an educator, and of course feeds into my written work as well that looks at inclusivity and policies and societal expectations and the way that the world is, or the way that I experience the world and what I know of it, what I've seen of it, and what I continue to learn because I'm ignorant on many, many things, is that there's always room for our truths. There's always room and space for us to convey where we're at. And that's really important for us to really find bonds. It's really important for us to dig into the reasoning of why things are the way they are, how we react to things, I'm really, really curious about a lot of aspects of psychology and biology and neurology and how we carry so much in our bodies and how that's felt. It is a continuum. It's not something that stops suddenly. Just like our creative selves don't really stop. Even if we are not writing, we are still creating in some form or another. It may just not look the way that we've been taught or the ways in which we just have come to the written word. So yeah, I think that sums it up. I don't know if it's pretty profound, but I just feel like there's always work to be done. Most importantly, that work can include prioritizing who we are and ensuring we're getting what we need, fulfilling our curiosities, understanding more, reaching out to others, learning, being outspoken, challenging systems, and that our work in whatever methodology, medium you choose to do it, be it written, illustrated, auditory, it really makes a difference. And it can really bring someone so much closer to a level of understanding they weren't in perhaps days, weeks, months, even minutes ago. That's how I pursue the work I do. And again, it all feeds itself. It all feeds each facet of what I do. And that's what's really important to me, is that my creative self is an extension of other aspects of who I am that really broadens my understanding of the world, which helps me understand myself better and how I can contribute to make it a better place. So I think that's how I'm thinking about my work, how circuitous it is. That sometimes when it feels bleak, which it can a lot, that there's so many bright spots to what we do, and there's such importance, especially if it's keeping you going. I think I'll just leave it at that, because I can ramble, y'all. I'm from New York City. We can be very succinct or we can ramble. Who knows? Depends on the day. But thanks, Mike, for opening up this space for us to check in with each other. And I hope everyone's doing better than okay. I really hope that for all of us. Stay safe and take care.
Hi, Mike, and thank you for asking where I am right now. This is Lisa Robinson. I am a photographer who you interviewed several years ago for Keep the Channel Open. And the first thing that came to mind when you asked how I'm doing is a quotation by Marcus Aurelius. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Such powerfully true words. I do have to say that a very regular meditation practice keeps me very grounded in the present. By being grounded in the present, even though I'm very disheartened by prospects of what may come to pass, emotionally I don't spiral into those places. Instead, I'm incredibly grateful for everything in my life, every single day, and I take nothing for granted. In terms of who I'm looking to for, or the people sustaining me, obviously friends and family are foremost, but I also receive an incredible amount of encouragement from Robert Reich, who is an economist with a Substack, whose vision for America is one of liberty, justice, and opportunity for all. He is a very bright light in a world that can use a lot of illumination. But on a personal level, day to day, my attentions are completely focused on my daughter, with whom my relationship is thankfully improving as she goes through a difficult stage of adolescence. And I'm finding that the nurturing of that relationship is an incredibly positive one for me. Just focusing on the things in my life that I can control. To that end, the work that I'm doing right now is also incredibly valuable. because it locates my mind in timescales much larger than a single lifespan. So for the most part, I'm contemplating humanity in scales that extend beyond a generation or two or even three. And in doing this kind of contemplation of our larger existence, there's a kind of acceptance and understanding that we as a species have created a world of domination in which we are the apex animals. We are these kind of dominating creatures, and we are essentially consuming ourselves. It really requires, if we do truly wish to change the course that we're on, it really will require a shared vision to that end. And as crazy as it seems, I do believe that we're going to get there. It's going to be messy, and it's not going to be easy. But I don't know. I feel like the optimist in me really does believe that we will manage to find a way through this and come out more united and more committed than ever before.
The next messages you'll hear are from Susan Rosenberg Jones and Gabrielle Bates. Susan was my guest in episode 43. She's a photographer whose work is all about people and relationships, community. And that was one of the main focuses of our talk back in 2017. Gabby Bates has been on the show twice, most recently in episode 137, where we talked about her debut poetry collection, Judas Goat. And before that, in episode 23 for a book club chat that introduced me to Bridget Begin Kelly's work. And Gabby has actually introduced me to a lot of poetry via her podcast, The Poet Salon, with Luther Hughes and Duji Tahat. Not to mention that show is one I was able to learn from as a podcast host. Here's Susan Rosenberg Jones.
Hi, my name is Susan Rosenberg Jones, and Mike, you asked me some questions and gave me some prompts, so here we go. You asked where I am right now. Well, I'm still living in the same apartment in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan. Right now, I am kind of between photographic projects. What happened is we adopted a dog. I'm trying to balance the dog's needs, my husband's needs. Also, we're getting older. He's going to be 80 years old this coming Thursday. And I've been thinking a lot about, my life and how much more of it I have, because you just don't know. I'm pretty healthy, but anything can happen. And with photography, I've got a vintage camera last summer, and I've been using that here and there, enjoying working with film again, and the kind of blurry, fuzzy, interesting negatives that come out of this camera. So that's good. I also bought a book to teach myself how to cut paper artfully, and I'm going to try some collages using cut paper and photographs and see what happens. So I'm, experimental and always coming up with something that will keep me engaged. And toward whom do your thoughts most strongly turn? I guess my thoughts strongly turn to my immediate family, my daughter, my husband, even my dog. I always worry, even though my daughter is a thriving 43-year-old who got married this year actually, working as an actor on Broadway and all the good stuff. I guess I'm a mother, I always worry. And I just, don't know how much longer I have in this life. I'm 73, hopefully another 10 or 20 years. Hopefully another 20 years. But I worry if I passed away that she wouldn't have, because her dad died 20 years ago almost. So I would worry because I know that she and I have a very strong bond. My husband is doing pretty well. I am not as worried about him as I used to be. He's pretty healthy and taking care of himself. And I just hope that we have some good years ahead. Who are the people who are sustaining you? And to whom are you giving your care? That's interesting. It's almost the same people. Well, it is the same people in some way. My husband is definitely sustaining me on a daily basis, and my daughter is always sustaining me. Also, I have really good friends, and I keep my friends. I love the idea that I have friends from way back when I was a kid, or at least when I was like 13 or 14. And I have new friends that I've only met a couple years ago or recently, thanks to, I believe it's because I'm out in the world doing different things, interacting with people, maybe in tap dance class, so different communities that I've been in where I have developed friendships, and I think that has been sustaining me, the friendships. How are you thinking about your work right now? My work is, I think I've brought it to a good point where I am clear about what my themes are, and I think people looking at my work, the bodies of work that I've done, they all kind of relate to each other. So I'm thinking about my work. I want to continue exploring people and relationships and things that what I'm attracted to.
Hi, Mike. It's Gabrielle Bates calling from my kitchen in Seattle, Washington. I think the last time we spoke, I was in Alabama, and now I'm calling you from Seattle. And this is a very new to me home in Seattle, even though I've lived in this city for about 10 years. I'm very newly in a different part of the city, in a different home space, and still very much adjusting to that and enjoying the slightly eerie energy of interacting and navigating a city that I know pretty well, but from a totally new angle and in a new neighborhood. So it's like, it still feels a little bit like I'm house sitting, but the house is mine. And I kind of love that feeling of everything feeling new and strange and yet also intimate. Shocking for anyone who's read my poems that I would be into that. I've written a lot of new poems since the last time we talked, since Judas Goat came out, but I haven't published very many. I've been trying to get to know my poems and myself, keeping that a bit more private for a while, and I'm just starting to dip my toes into sharing work with the world again, which feels a little scary, but also like it's time. And I continue to endeavor towards this novel draft that I've been working on for many, many, many years and have started entirely over many times, and which may never be shared with the world in any way. It may just be a project for me to work on myself. But I've been working on that a lot since my book came out. I felt like publishing Judas Goat opened up some psychic space for me to really pour fully into a different project, and not just a different project, but a different kind of consciousness. I know there are writers for whom writing poetry and writing prose feels like they're using the same brain, but for me, it feels like switching onto an entirely different track. And so I've been playing with that on a more regular and sustained basis in the last year or two. So that's part of what I've been up to over here. I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone else, and just so grateful for you and the work you do with this show and in so many other ways.
Andre Ramos Woodard was my guest in episode 133. In their message here, they mentioned their photo series Black Snafu, which is one we talked about in our conversation. That series involves combining new photographs with appropriated imagery from old racist cartoons. And that idea of taking something ugly and turning it into something beautiful, something powerful, that's one that continues to resonate right now. Here's Andre.
Right now, I'm in Houston, Texas, and I'm currently in the middle of an artist block. I'm not really sure how to go forward at this moment in my practice. I mean, I enjoy making work, of course, and I like to make work about my specific experience and my identity and my community, but I don't know. It's okay to be in a little bit of an artist block sometimes. I haven't made anything in about a month, but I'm still trying to find inspiration to do things. When I can't make work, I can look for open calls or opportunities to kind of inspire myself to at least put my work out there. So I guess that's where my practice is at right now and what I'm doing. As far as who my thoughts most strongly turn towards, I think that's a lot of people. It's really primarily my loved ones and my friends and family, my husband, my mom and dad, my brothers and sister, just the people that I can rely on whenever I can't rely on myself, and they've done it before. I'm not necessarily, afraid for any of them right now, even though the United States and this country is absolutely bonkers after the election. But I just always think about them. They're the people that get me through the day whenever I am too inside my own head to think about anything that's not positive. So those are the people that my feelings most strongly kind of turn towards. And these are also the same people that are sustaining me. I mean, I get up every day and there's plenty of reasons for me to be alive. And sometimes I have to remind myself of those things, but at the end of the day, I'm a pretty codependent person. And so without the people in my life that have proven to me that life is worth living, it would be really difficult. Those are the people that are absolutely sustaining me, and sustaining my practice kind of by proxy. And as far as how I'm thinking about my work right now, girl, I do not know. Kind of continuing the idea of my little artist block. I don't know. I'm exploring right now. I'm continuing my project Black Snafu, which is an exploration of drawing and African American and Pan Africanness. I'm also doing another body of work called What It's Like to Feel, which is centered around mental health. And so I don't know. I'm really just thinking about how do I use my work to continue being didactic? How do I continue to teach people things about the experiences that they will never have? Or how do I use my work to kind of invoke emotion and bring someone who's relative into the work? So yeah, I think that's where I'm at right now. Thank you so much, Mike, for this. I hope that you're doing well.
Maggie Takuta Hall has been my guest 3 times in episodes 110, 127, and 147. The first time was to talk about her YA novel, The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, and then we did 2 book club chats. I think you'll be able to tell from the message that Maggie and I have gone on to become good friends, and, it's never a bad time to have friends who make you laugh. Maybe now it's particularly great, though.
This is Maggie Takuta Hall. I'm in Oakland, California right now, and in the general vibes of buckle in, chuckle fucks, here we go. My thoughts right now have turned mostly to the undocumented people in our country who do so much of our labor, picking our food and taking care of our children and taking care of our elderly and doing all of the most difficult work that we are unwilling to do ourselves, as well as the people in Palestine and in Lebanon who will only see further devastation because of how things have gone. And I just hope that we were able to pose more resistance this time than we were last time around, but I doubt it. I don't mean to be such a downer. I'm just incapable of dishonesty. But I also work a lot in the advocacy space around book bans because that's what I know best. And if I learned anything in 2016, it's to focus your attention on battles where your labor is best spent. And I know that mine is best spent there. And today I did a press conference with a bunch of different people in that space, speaking against the regulation 14170 in South Carolina that is going to ban a bunch of books from every public library across the state and every school across the state. And one of the people was a teenager, and I really hate every time people say the kids are all right, everything's going to be fine. I think it's our responsibility to fix the world for them so that they can enjoy their childhoods. And also, I felt such immense pride and hope watching this teenage girl cite the Miller test and speak so eloquently about her right to freedom of access to books. And so I don't know that she will realize how much she did for me in that moment. And that wasn't her job to take care of me ever, but in this press conference. But I was the lady crying on a Zoom a lot because I was just so moved by her and by her passion and by her expertise in something that most adults haven't taken the effort to learn about. And so that was very meaningful. The people sustaining me are people like her, but also my family and my children. And I am really trying to focus on my family a lot going forward, so that the horrificness of this time does not touch the way that my children feel loved or the way my husband feels loved. I think they are the great loves of my life, and it would be very foolish of me indeed to forget that in the time when those relationships are even more essential. And so I am trying to focus on good times that we create together, even if I have to take breaks from it to talk to my 4-year-old son about why I really don't like Donald Trump and why he's so bad for the country. And this is what racism means. And this is what deportation means. And this is what genocide means. That work was going to exist either way. And I was going to have to be willing to do it regardless. In terms of how I'm thinking about my work right now, to me, it is a moment where I have evaluated my own privileges, and I am somebody who has accidentally fallen in love with somebody who's much more fiscally solvent than I am. So for me, for the next year at least, my focus is not going to be on my career. My focus is going to be on advocacy work and working to resist the fascist regime we're about to embark upon. And I hope that my small contributions are in any way helpful in that fight, because I know lots of smart people already exist in this space. But I never want to look back and think I should have been doing more. And I have this immense privilege, and I intend to use it. Mike, I think you're a great guy. Thanks for asking these really thoughtful questions. Thanks for holding space for such a thoughtful conversation, and, you know, for holding space for the lyrics from Defying Gravity as well. I think that's really important to people right now. Take care.
Next, we're going to hear from Alana Aratam, Elisa Herod, and David Naiman. Alana was my guest in episode 65. She's a photographer whose work is very much about connecting with and celebrating people of color, and particularly Black women, sharing their stories, showing their beauty, their power, their strength, their resilience. And then Elisa Herod was my guest in episode 118. That was a book club conversation about Tove Jansson's The True Deceiver. Elisa is someone who I've always enjoyed talking about books with. She's also someone whose voice on disability and public health I've come to really value. Finally, David Naimon has been on the show 3 times. First in episode 78, where we talked about his writing and his podcast, Between the Covers. Then in episode 108, where he was part of our virtual panel on literary podcasting. And then most recently in episode 116, which was the very first KTCO Book Club episode. It goes without saying that this show wouldn't be what it is without everything I've learned listening to Between the Covers. And David's also been a great friend to me over the years. Here's Alana Aratam.
Hi there. I'm currently in my studio in Tucson, Arizona. The weather has been so lovely this early December. It's been mid-70s to 80-degree temperatures. Perfect time of year for Tucson. It makes me almost want to scream about climate change. But, hey, I'm taking a much needed break from all the devastation right now. By the close of this year, I would have had close to, about 11 shows and started about 2 new bodies of work, worked on some other ones, all while simultaneously trying to maintain some kind of personal life. So, I'm tired and hoping to have a couple of weeks to refuel over the holiday before it all begins again in January. I'm also currently in my head a lot lately going into 2025. I can't help but think about the future of this country and wondering what my role in it is going to be. The prominent thought that keeps coming up is, what has this country done for Black women? We seem to matter only when it comes time to secure a vote for the blue team, but we're forgotten and treated like the housemaid most of the time, the rest of the time. And I don't know where we're going, but I do know that Black women shouldn't be rushing in to save the day. Kind of leaves us in a weird place, We didn't create this problem in this country, and we sure shouldn't be the ones to fix it. And that's kind of where my head's been at. So I decided that I'm going to go back to basics because it's all just so petty and confusing and emotional. So going back to basics feels like the right thing to do. I have pushed out so much energy this past year, and I want to pull some of it back in so I can tend to myself and my community and my friends and my family. This has already changed how I think about and approach my work. And my work has already started to shift because of this. I'm adding in new processes into my practice, and it's been interesting to find new ways and renewed conviction to carve out space for Black women's voices and our sort of absolute right to exist and thrive. The safety and security of Black women are at the forefront of my mind right now because we are, generally speaking, the last in this community to be given care and consideration. So that's where most of my attention is currently lying. But, I also have deep concerns and a heart full of worry for everyone that I am connected to in my very, very diverse and beautiful community, in my friendships, in my friend groups, in my family. I worry a lot. And because community has been such, huge importance to me and will no doubt become even more important in the coming years, I think most of us have been so individualistic. And I think it's going to take some effort for us to learn how to really be in community and how to decenter ourselves. I'm really trying to be better at this, being a part of the Southwest Black Artists Collective and the projects has allowed me to work alongside others and collaborate with other artists and, make room for those other voices and put my needs aside and, project the needs of others when that's appropriate. And, it's really teaching me a lot. Also, making sure that I continue to wake up early on Sunday mornings, as I have done for the past 5 years or so, to deliver food to the most vulnerable in our communities, really helps me feel like I'm a part of something important and necessary, and that, maybe the little bit of effort that I can put in that way is helpful in keeping people fed. And, doing this work really does replenish and restore my faith in people and the power of community. Feeling like my work right now is to be defiant in ways that are powerful, but not necessarily loud. This is being reflected in my work and in my life in general. I'm doubling down in my insistence to take up space and exist as a Black woman in this world, but I also no longer feel the need to convince others of that. I'm just going to do it because, what other choice do I have? I plan on taking cues from men this season and just take up all the space that I can with all the confidence that I have that it all belongs to me. Period. I mean, I really see that working for men. I just really feel like maybe that's an approach to look at, right? Like not waiting for people to give me the permission to do that, but just to take up the space, say what I want to say, do what I want to do, be unapologetically me, and continue to share stories of others like this, others who are unapologetically defiant in this time. So I think that's where I'm at. And I wish you all a really remarkable, in the best of ways, 2025.
Hi, Mike. Elisa here. Thanks for sending these questions. I'm going to start with where I am because I think that's going to answer everything else. I am in beautiful Portland, Oregon, in my office, which is still full of boxes because we moved here this spring after 30 years in Austin, Texas. We are really grateful to be here. I grew up in Idaho, so in some ways it's like coming back home. But of course, it's also very much about leaving a place. And I wish that I could take everyone with me who needs to leave Texas. And I also wish that Texas belonged to the people who want to stay there and who need to stay there instead of to the people who are running it right now. And I also wish so many things, that the aquifer wasn't running dry, that climate change was gentler everywhere. But right now, I'm in this house, which we bought partly hoping that we would have enough room for people to stay with us if they did want to leave and come here. And we came deliberately before the election because we felt that no matter what happened, things were going to be more difficult in Texas. And now we know a little bit more about how that's going to go. Although I think right now, mostly what I'm experiencing is uncertainty about a lot of things. It feels important to stay in that uncertainty. It feels important to double down on making art and making community and refusing to be swallowed up by whatever's going to happen next as much as we can. I don't know. I'm full of gratitude and I'm full of heartbreak and anger. And so much love for everybody who's getting ready to fight and help each other. And that's where I am right now. I hope you're well. Bye-bye.
Hello, Keep the Channel Open listeners. It's an honor to be invited to be part of Mike's roll call on the show. My name is David Naiman. I'm a writer and host of the book show Between the Covers. Mike gave us a set of questions that we could answer or ignore, and I've decided to answer them largely with the words of others. The first question, an open-ended one, is, where are you right now? And this is a poem by Ruth Stone called Train Ride. All things come to an end. Small calves in Arkansas, the bend of the muddy river. Do all things come to an end? No, they go on forever. They go on forever. The swamp, the vine-choked cypress, the oaks rattling last year's leaves, the thump of the rails, the kite, the still white stilted heron. All things come to an end. The red clay bank, the spread hawk, the bodies riding this train, the stalled truck, pale sunlight, the talk. The talk goes on forever. The wide, dry field of geese, a man stopped near his porch to watch. Release, release, between cold death and a fever. Send what you will, I will listen. All things come to an end? No, they go on forever. Mike's second question is, toward whom do your thoughts most strongly turn? This is a poem by Lena Khalaf Tufaha, the winner yesterday of the National Book Award in Poetry. This poem is called The State of, and then there's an M dash. So the state of. The state of. Noun, gerund of the verb to journey, a setting out, a departure. A boy's voice calls out from beneath what used to be the second story of a house. I am here, he cries. Can anyone hear me? I am here, and the night sky is sleeping on my chest. Noun, gerund of the verb to leave. An exodus, a detachment. A father has gone in search of bread. A baker has gone in search of flour. A mother has gone in search of a cloud. A people have gone, a world in each of them. Noun, gerund of the verb to travel. A parting, a demise. A girl steps on top of the walls of what used to be the third story of a house. I am searching for the sea, she cries. Has anyone seen it? It used to live in my window. Mike's third question. Who are the people who are sustaining you, and to whom are you giving your care? This reading might be the most oblique answer to one of the questions. It's a mysterious and irreducible poem, and also one of my favorite poems. It's by Muriel Rukeyser, and it's called Then I Saw What the Calling Was. All the voices of the wood called Muriel, but it was soon solved. It was nothing. It was not for me. The words were a little like mortal and more and endure, and a world like real, a sound like health or hell. Then I saw what the calling was. It was the road I traveled, the clear time, and these colors of orchards, gold behind gold, and the full shadow begin each tree and behind each slope. Not to me the calling, but to anyone, and at last I saw where the road lay through sunlight, and many voices, and the marvel, orchards, not for me, not for me, not for me. I came into my clear being, uncalled, alive, and sure. Nothing was speaking to me, but I offered, and all was well, and I arrived at the powerful green hill. Finally, how are you thinking about your work right now? Thinking about my work, I think of a distinction that the writer Edmond Jabez makes between a book and a novel, and how for him the novel goes against the book, because in a novel the author and or its characters sort of force themselves on the book, whereas the writer of a book, in contrast to the writer of a novel, sacrifices their voice to the voice of the book. This is what Jabez says. Writing a book means joining your voice to the virtual voice of the margins. It means listening to the letters swimming in the ink like 26 blind fish before they are born for our eyes. That is to say, before they die, fixed in their last cry of love. Then I shall have said what I had to say, and what every page already knew. This is why the aphorism is the deepest expression of the book. It lets the margins breathe. It bears inside it the breath of the book and expresses the universe at the same time.
The last three messages are from Amanda Marchand, Becky Senf, and Matthew Salisis. Amanda was my guest in episode 132. Her photographic work is very much engaged with the natural world, with the environment, and more with climate change, which is, of course, something that weighs heavily on a lot of our minds, certainly mine. Becky Senf is the chief curator at the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson. She was my guest in episode 39. You're going to hear her talk about a recent exhibition at the center, how art and art exhibitions can become a site for community. And it's a perspective that I'm so glad to include here. And then Matthew Salisis was my guest in episode 113. We talked then about his book, Disappear, Doppelganger, Disappear. And I also recently read his most recent novel, The Sense of Wonder, which I loved. I talked about connecting with art at the beginning of this episode. And I think Matthew's books are something that have really done that for me as an Asian American, especially recently. Here's Amanda Marchand.
I'm in Brooklyn, New York, in my studio/bedroom at my desk. I coach artists, and I just finished a meeting. More largely, existentially, I am trying not to think about the world too much these days, but every time I turn on the radio, I'm reminded of what a different place this is from when I was a child. I have two boys, August and Emmett, ages 15 and 20, and I worry about them and their future, climate especially, but the abusive nature of social media, the way that it really tears you away from your freedom, your ability to concentrate, and how pervasive it is. I guess my thoughts most strongly turn towards them. The people who are sustaining me are my husband, my children, my family, my friends, my art group, and my now longtime collaborator on This Earthen Door, Leah Sobsey, with whom I've been working for 4 years collaboratively. To whom am I giving care would be my son Emmett, who's 15, and my 20-year-old at college, who still requires a gentle hand in different matters, as well as my husband, my sister with her young children, a little bit my father. How am I thinking about my work right now? Well, my work has been changing and is becoming increasingly focused on the environment, climate change, climate chaos. Thinking about the materials of photography and how to use them more sustainably in a more eco-friendly way, even an eco-feminist way, collaboratively. So this has been the direction of my work and something I hope to continue pursuing in this vein. And thanks, Mike, for the questions. Okay. Best wishes to all.
My name is Becky Senf, and I work as Chief Curator at the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona in Tucson. I want to say a bit about the exhibitions we currently have on view, as they shape how I'm thinking about the presidential election results in the coming years. In early September, the center opened an exhibition of the work of Luis Carlos Bernal, a Chicano photographer born in the U.S.-Mexico border town of Douglas in 1941. He grew up there and in Phoenix, eventually attending Arizona State University to study art. Then, in 1972, he moved to Tucson to create the photography program at Pima Community College. In the 1970s and 80s, he made the work he is known for, sensitive portrayals of the Mexican-American community, people photographed at social gatherings or in their places of employment, or most often at home, surrounded by family photographs, religious imagery, and meaningful personal items. In his 30s and 40s, Bernal worked on various projects, including photographing the 1984 Olympics in LA. He attended Latin American colloquia in Cuba and Mexico, and built networks in the U.S. and in Mexico. Discrimination against Chicano people meant his networks in the U.S. were less robust, his influence in America less profound than locally here in Tucson and in Mexico. Then, in 1989, the worst happened. As Lou Bernal was biking to work, he was hit by a car. He spent the last 4 years of his life in a coma, passing away on his birthday at the age of 52. His daughters, Lisa Bernal Breathauer and Katrina Ann Bernal, retained control of his archive until 2014, when they gifted it to the Center for Creative Photography. We plan towards an eventual book and exhibition, finding the perfect scholar, curator Elizabeth Ferrer, who wrote Latinx photography in the United States, to research in the archive and bring forward a new, deeper, more complex, and more comprehensive understanding of Bernal and his work than has ever been shared before. When the exhibition opened, the center also had a powerful exhibition of Chicana photographer Laura Aguilar's work on view at the Phoenix Art Museum, featuring her nudes in nature. 2 weeks after the Bernal debut, we celebrated the opening of Chicana Photographers LA, guest curated by Sybil Venegas, and featuring the work of Cristina Fernandez, Star Montoya, Amina Cruz, Sandra De La Losa, and Laura Aguilar, complementing the Bernal exhibition with more current works from another region of the American Southwest. We worked with a community advisory group on the Bernal exhibition, and with them, the excitement and enthusiasm were palpable. The exhibition is joyous, and it became clear that I was part of a vast collective project of restoring Bernal to the history of photography, to Mexican-American culture, to Latinx art history. And every single person who read Elizabeth Ferrer's book or visited the exhibition or came to one of our events at the CCP or at the libraries and businesses we're partnering with was part of raising the visibility of Bernal and his work. The work over the last few months has felt great, meaningful, affirmative, celebratory, poignant. In Tucson, I work with Mexican-American people in all facets of what we do. Our Chicana mayor, Regina Romero, proclaimed a Luis Carlos Bernal Day in October. We partnered with the UA Vice President for Hispanic Serving Institute Initiatives, Dr. Marla Franco, to promote the exhibition. The CCP's infinitely creative learning and engagement manager, Denise Brito, has put together events, programs, and activities celebrating Bernal and the Artists in Chicana Photographers LA. The national election results, thus, were shocking. It feels so out of step with my experience in Arizona and at the CCP. The communities I belong to are invested in inclusion and representing diverse perspectives in meaningful and impactful ways. In the days after the results were announced, I remembered attending women's marches in LA and how powerful it felt to see one of my communities, the women who, despite their individualities and differences, came together to show our solidarity for one another and for our values. I keep holding that feeling and the visuals of that experience in my mind. We have strong communities who will continue their meaningful, important work. And I think of that famous Margaret Mead quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has."
Hello, this is Matthew Salisis. I am in Blacksburg, Virginia, in the office in my house, which is facing the street on a very cold day. In the other room, my puppy is asleep. My wife is working. I'm sitting here recording this, though I'm not sure what to say. I remember in 2015, when my daughter was 4, telling her mom how amazing it was that our daughter was going to grow up having only had 2 presidents, 1 black and 1 woman. And then we know what happened. At that time, I was teaching at the University of Houston, and my creative writing students were, for the most part, devastated. There was a long period in which many people felt as if they could not write, or as if there was no point in writing. For those students, that was the first election they had ever voted in. Teaching college students means always seeing people vote in their first elections. Means seeing how the results shape students' view of political participation and of their own agency. Last year, I was teaching at Columbia, New York City, watching the students stand up for Palestinian rights against one of the wealthiest universities in the nation, which called the cops on its own students. Every day I walked with my kids past a line of police and private security guards to take them to school. Plus people who came in from other parts of the city to see what all the fuss was about, or to cause the fuss. Inside the gates, in their tents, the students peacefully educated each other. After the 2016 election, I remember a writer I know reminded me that I had come through his university during the campaign season, and I had told him that Trump would win. I told him elections are about who's in control of the story. And when I looked around, all the stories were about Trump. He was the one who would win or lose as far as the media was concerned. He used that same strategy the entire presidency, covering up one terrible thing with a whole host of other terrible things, so that the story became not any particular thing he did, but about him, the man at the center of everything, who seemed to have the ultimate agency, which is part of what makes him so appealing to certain voters. I remember the worst thing about the Trump years was, in his weird way, maybe the best thing about the Trump years, which was that we had to constantly resist. Every day was a fight. You couldn't pick and choose anymore what battles to participate in. It was exhausting. Sometimes, in retrospect, with all that exhaustion, it seems like the pandemic was inevitable. The whole time during the pandemic, people complained endlessly on social media about having to be home with their families. But I love being home with my kids. I miss those times now. But that too was exhausting. Every day I feel more tired than I've ever felt in my life. It's like discovering anew what tired means. And yet I'm a parent, a husband. We have to take care of each other. We have to take care of ourselves. Next semester, for the first time since I started teaching, I have a semester off, finally. I have to write a memoir. I've known for a long time that the memoir was about love and melancholy, personal and communal grief. Recently, I thought it would end with me getting remarried. Then there were the protests at Columbia, and I thought that might be the end. Now the election seems like another extension. Life goes on, grief goes on, is what I'm saying, I guess, whether you want it to or not, and the way you want it to or not, it goes on. When my late wife was dying, she said to me, "This is not a life." She was in so much pain. I think about that all the time now. What is a life? If life goes on, with or without you living it.
So that marks the end of the messages I collected from past guests. There's one more clip I want to share, but before I do that, I just wanted to add in my own response to my prompt. I mentioned at the start here that after the election, I was in a place of struggle and confusion. Over the past several weeks, though, I've done a lot of reconnecting. There's these messages, of course, and correspondences with other folks who responded, but who were too overwhelmed to record their own messages. But also I've been reconnecting with people physically closer to me, people like my friends, of course, but also my old activist communities. I'd let my engagement with that stuff lapse since a lot of my personal life fell apart a few years ago, but coming back has reminded me in a more tangible way that I'm not alone in this, neither in the feelings I'm having now, nor in the work to come. And that has been sustaining me. It's pointing me in directions that I can give my care and my efforts, and it's helped move me from a place of despair to one of resolve. I was going to say hope there at first, and probably I should, but I know a lot of people are having a hard time with hope right now, which makes me think of what the activists Mariame Kaba and Kelly Hayes wrote about hope in their book, Let This Radicalize You, which is one of the books I've read since the election. Let me just read you a little passage here from that book, from the chapter, Hope and Grief Can Coexist. Just as patience is a practice rather than a feeling, hope and grief are not simply things we feel, but things we enact in the world. When we enact grief with intention and in concert with other people, we can find and create moments of relief, comfort, and even joy, and those moments can sustain us. As Malkia Devich-Cyril writes, quote, "Becoming aware of grief gives us more choices about how to respond to grief and opens up possibilities to approach grief not only with compassion for self and others, but also with joy. Joy is not the opposite of grief. Grief is the opposite of indifference." End quote. Hope, too, requires us to reject indifference. And like any indifference-rejecting phenomenon, it demands effort in order to thrive. When we talk about hope in these times, we are not prescribing optimism. Rather, we are talking about a practice and a discipline. This practice of hope allows us to remain creative and strategic. It does not require us to deny the severity of our situation or detract from our practice of grief. To practice active hope, we do not need to believe that everything will work out in the end. We need only decide who we are choosing to be and how we are choosing to function in relation to the outcome we desire, and abide by what those decisions demand of us. I'm going to close by sharing a little clip from my other show, Hey, It's Me, which I co-host with my friend Rachel Zucker. Rachel, too, has been someone who has been sustaining me and someone to whom I'm offering my care. And Hey, It's Me is a part of that for both of us. This clip is from this week's episode of Hey, It's Me, which we recorded just after the election. To set this up, Rachel was describing going in to teach her undergraduate students after the election, many of whom were devastated by the election results. In this clip, she shares an email she received from one of her students, and then a response to that email from her son, Moses.
I'm just going to read, it's very short. "Professor, I'm very sorry I missed class on Wednesday. I could not get out of bed that morning. I am depressed and despairing, not for myself, but for people who cannot afford groceries, and for undocumented immigrants, and for documented immigrants, and for trans people, and for so many other communities whose members do not have any safety nets like I do. Even during the Biden era, I have watched methods of legal recourse be continually stripped from the underprivileged by Donald Trump's court appointees, both in the Supreme Courts and in the lower courts, and it will only get worse over the coming decades, and I do not know what to do. Everyone wants to overthrow the system, and I do not imagine that that would be effective, and it's 80 degrees in November, and it used to snow on Halloween. I'm sure this is old information to you, but I am stuck on it. I promise to be back in class next week." It's like so sweet and, you know, heartbreaking. Like even like, I'm sure this is old information to you, you know? And in class, I sort of, we had class, but I also sort of gave a whole speech about the importance of literature and also, but how I have no idea what's important anymore. And I really don't know what to do and, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, and so I said to the student, despair seems like a completely sane response to this election, but I hope it's not where you stay, you know, emotionally. And can you please Zoom with me today or tomorrow? You know, I just need to make sure, you know, that the student is okay. And, you know, I imagined Zooming with the student and like telling her, you know, I'm whatever thing about slow activism and soft activism and a bigger picture and all this stuff. And I just heard myself as I imagined her to be hearing me and thinking like, yeah, you're just old, you know, like this is like so typical of a certain middle-aged person who becomes kind of conservative or more conservative or less political, you know? And so I asked Moses if he would respond to her as well, because he's somebody who has not been able, you know, from 2016 until somewhat recently, has not been able to not hear the call to direct action. I didn't know what he was going to say exactly, but I thought hearing it from somebody who's 25 would mean something very different, whatever he said, than someone who's 52. So Moses wrote, "Dear student. This is Moses, Rachel's oldest son. She asked me to respond to your email with some thoughts. First of all, I hope you are able to take care of yourself in a meaningful way today, and that you're thinking about how to take care of yourself and the people close to you in the days, weeks, and years ahead. It's important. I'm not sure there's anything I can say that will be the source of much comfort to you. I was already struggling with deep depression when Trump was elected the first time, and then things got much worse. Since then, I've had mental health challenges off and on. I've also done some organizing work that I'm extremely proud of on electoral campaigns and around issues of climate change and prison abolition. Organizing can be one of the best cures for the feeling of hopelessness, not because it ever seems like you're likely to win more than you lose, but because it feels fucking great to do something meaningful and to do it with people in your community. I've also spent a lot of time doing things that don't feel politically significant, like living in a Buddhist monastery and tending to my own mental well-being in a deep way. The truth, I now think, is that the world isn't ending any more or less than it always has been, and that despair is always on the table. But so is doing something meaningful, and so is having a joyful, great life. I hope you're able to take some time for all three. Include despair and joy, and remember that the thing you want is a peaceful, safe, free, and joyful life for everyone, yourself included. Not only is there nothing wrong with that, it's the thing we're actually fighting for. Take your time when you need it, and also challenge yourself to sometimes show up to places that don't feel good. Bring your whole self, including your hopelessness, to these places. We're all in this together. Love, Moses.
That is our show. Editing and mixing on this episode are by me. The music is also by me, and transcription help is by Shay Aguinaldo. I want to say thank you to everyone who sent in a message, and to all of you listening. Thank you. It means a lot to me to share this time with you. I'm looking ahead to the new year and choosing hope, and I hope you will too. Whatever comes, remember, keep the channel open.